I used to have a small business delivering propane gas to customers who lived up north, away from civilization. These were a mix of people with cottages, those living off-grid, and what you might call exiles from the daily grind. My deliveries were split between my regulars and those to whom I delivered only once. The Korhonens were the latter. When they called me up one July day, I didn't think anything of it. We set a delivery date a week into August and chatted a bit over the phone. They struck me as a normal couple, childless, in their 50s, expats from Finland. Their only real instruction was that if I couldn't complete the delivery by sundown, I should return in the morning instead. On that August day, I would have easily made it to their place by noon if not for a spot of trouble with my truck that made me double back to town for repairs. By the time the truck was in working order, it was late in the afternoon, but I thought I would risk it anyway. I called en route but nobody picked up, which isn't particularly strange given the poor cell reception around here, and kept driving, feeling guilty that any potential delay would be my fault because of the truck. The Korhonens lived quite deep in the bush, in an area I wasn't used to delivering to, and the way was longer than it had looked on the map. When I arrived at their property gate it was already evening, and further darkness seemed to be drifting in on the unseasonably cold breeze. I tried their phone again, no answer, then called out into the wild, no response. I had the code to the gate and could see a building down the gravel driveway, so I opened it and drove through. Nothing caught my eye except for a line of small white stones encircling the homestead including across the driveway, but my truck had no issue getting over it. The building looked like it was in the midst of repairs, again, not unusual, and had a clearly defined older section, a newer add-on and an attached metal shed. I parked the truck, got out and knocked on the front door. No one responded. The sun was sinking below the trees by now, but the propane tanks were easily reached and I decided to fill them despite the Korhonens' instructions because I didn't see a good reason to leave only to come back tomorrow. It was while backing my truck towards the tanks that I heard the first bang. It was followed promptly by another, and a third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Then they ended. I stopped the truck and identified the source of the banging as somewhere inside the house. I knocked on its front door again, harder than before. Again, nobody answered, but this time the door itself swung open. It apparently hadn't been locked. I stepped inside. There was a sterility and a stillness there, the eerie coziness of a morgue after hours. Things were neat. The neatness was unsettling. "Hello," I said to no one in particular. Perhaps it was an animal doing the banging, I thought. That seemed the most reasonable explanation. As I scanned the Korhonens' bookshelf, John Muir, Wendell Berry, Pentti Linkola, and the banging resumed, followed by silence, followed by a voice weakly saying, "Help me." The voice chilled me. I asked, "Who's there?" "Atai Korhonen," the voice said. I still didn't know from where their son. They'd told me they didn't have children. "Where are you?" "In the shed." "Help me, please." I found the door to the shed padlocked, but I had bolt cutters in my truck. I told the boy to wait while I ran to get them. Heart beating. Then I came back, cut through the padlock and found myself face to face with a dirty, emaciated child, pot-bellied, with shadows under his eyes, his hair cut sickly short and skin that looked as pale as clouds. He pleaded with me to take him out of there to save him. I asked him to follow me, but he said he was too weak to walk, so I picked him up and began carrying him to my truck. All the while my mind was processing the best course of action. I would have called the police, but I didn't have cell reception. When we were a few dozen steps from the truck, Atai Korhonen suddenly cried out, and when I asked what was the matter he begged me to save his sister. There's a key hidden by the gate. They keep her underground. Please. Let me show you. So instead of putting him in the truck, I turned and carried him up the gravel driveway towards the gate, feeling his tears on my back. But the moment we crossed the boundary of white stones, he pushed away from me, dropped to the ground, and in some combination of the movements of a child and a wild dog ran into the woods. I yelled after him to wait, gazing into the depths defended by the gray trees, but saw nothing but darkness, and when I looked up I realized that night had fallen. After grabbing a flashlight from the glove compartment of my truck, I pressed ahead into the woods where I thought the boy had gone, but I couldn't find him. I'm not sure for how long I tried, or when I gave up, but it was while making my way back to the Korhonen homestead that I came across a clearing, and, in the middle of it, there he was. It was a moonless night. Dark. But for some reason I could see him unnaturally well, as if he himself were emitting light, not a white light but one as the darkness itself, black and shining, penetrating the night world with its own. A rumbling began somewhere far, far away. And a wind. And as the rumbling grew, the wind intensified and Atai Korhonen shone ever and ever more intensely, his small head becoming a kind of anti-beacon, and in the skies, and between trees, over me began to pass first only a few, then more, and soon a multitude of moths in all variations of the darkest colors imaginable, some as small as fingernails, others the size of birds, and I dropped to my knees, then fell onto my chest, and the moths converged. They converged on Atai Korhonen, on his blindingly dark and shining head, covering it, soaking up his infinitely black light, and while they did so and while I lay at the edge of the clearing, the most terrible, vile, and violent scenes played in my mind. Thefts and betrayals, murders, and abuses and tortures, brief but vivid glimpses of such horrors. Most of the people involved I did not know, but some I did, some of them I knew. Then they scattered. It was as if Atai Korhonen had grown and exploded into a rain of moths, which disappeared into the depths of the forest in all directions, leaving me in utter and lonely silence on my chest on the cold, damp earth. I eventually got back to the homestead and into my truck. I drove away. The minute I regained cell reception, I called the police to report what had happened. They investigated but found no one imprisoned there, no signs of wrongdoing and no evidence the Korhonens had ever had a child, named Atai, or otherwise. But in the weeks, months, and years following the day on which I'd met Atai Korhonen, some of the evil things I saw, I can confirm that they've come true. I do not doubt that everything I saw has or will soon come to pass. All that suffering. I no longer deliver propane. I still live in the area. To the best of my knowledge, the Korhonens are no longer resident on their property. But I went by once, a few months ago, and the place was still kept and clean, and the repairs were in a more advanced state than before. Just before I left, I swear to you I heard a banging.